who gets to welcome you officially to a now recorded workshop called The Story We Need to Tell About Homelessness. This workshop is a partnership between All Home and Shift the Bay, a coalition-driven initiative to advance housing and racial justice in the Bay Area. Our initiative offers research-driven field practice strategies, tactics, and messages to seize this powerful moment to drive new narratives for our movement. As you know, homelessness is a top concern in the Bay Area, and this is very deeply, closely tied to our work for housing and economic justice. As you probably also know, it can be really hard to talk about. There are persistent myths and misperceptions, very strong emotions, and often a lack of clarity on the solutions that are at our fingertips. All of these things can make this a challenge. So today we are going to discuss Shift the Bay's newest message resource, how to talk about homelessness and unpack what's working and what's not working in our conversations and communications about homelessness. Hopefully you got a chance to review that message guide before coming in today's session. We'll be dropping a link in the chat box in just a few moments in case you need to revisit or have it at your fingertips during the session. But today's session is designed to be interactive, engaging, and want to start that off by inviting you to go ahead and start using that chat box to share who's here and why. If you haven't already done so, please introduce yourself. We have nearly 100 folks here today, so we want to know who you are. We'd love for you to share your name, your pronouns, your organization. Tell us where you're zooming in from and what is bringing you here today. What are you hoping to learn? What are you hoping to know? What are you wanting to do? Please make sure you're chatting all panelists and attendees, not just panelists. That will allow everybody to hear your comments and hopes. And without further ado, I am going to pass things over to Edie to really get this party started.
Thanks so much, Alina. Thanks everybody for coming. I see All Home is rolling deep in the chat. Nice to see everybody here. So I'm just going to quickly share our agenda, give you a sense of what to expect today, and we'll kick it right off. So we're going to start off with a role play, but don't worry, we're not going to ask you to role play. We've got folks lined up and ready to go to start off with some real life example of what a conversation can sound like on these topics. And then I'll do a presentation, hopefully keep it to just 15-20 minutes, and going deeper than the guide, going beyond the guide. As Alina said, we hope you've seen the guide. You can look at it later, but we're really trying to dig a little deeper today. And to that end, we'll have time for some Q&A afterwards. Then we'll have some breakout discussions with you all, and a quick report back on a Jamboard. And then we're going to share a toolkit, a social media toolkit based on the guide that all of you can use to put these messages and narrative frames out into the world. So don't leave early, don't leave at the breakout. That part will be brief, and we're going to end with that extra resource that we're excited to share. So without further ado, I'm actually going to stop sharing the screen real quick, and actually, Madison, maybe if you can spotlight Monet and Zach. I'll just introduce Monet Boyd from Barhi. That's the region's public health agencies all coming together to tackle racial inequities in our public health system. And Zach Frenette, who is a member of All Homes Community Advisory Council, and he's also a director at Ground Floor Public Affairs. So another comms professional joining us as well. And they're going to just have a quick conversation. The context is, Monet is us. She's a strategic communicator trying to shift the narrative. Zach is an acquaintance, maybe a neighbor. They're just chatting about their work and its impact on homelessness. And really, we just wanted to show how to reframe some of the deeply rooted ideas that people hold and change the way folks think about homelessness in a way that's based on our research And, often we have conversations with electeds or coalition partners or other folks, but we wanted this example to be accessible, and it's still relevant to those conversations we have amongst ourselves and with people we think are more informed. But I have certainly heard some of the views you might hear in this conversation from our partners and folks. So this is hopefully widely applicable, and I'll let y'all take it away.
Great, thanks, Edie. So as she said, we're going to do a little quick role play here. I'm just going to jump right into it. So hi there, it's really nice to meet you. I saw you moved into the neighborhood a couple of weeks ago. My name's Zach. I work in real estate. I'm everyone's local realtor. It's really nice to meet you. What do you do for a living?
I love that. And it's so great to meet you as well. I work at the intersection of health and housing, which is really thinking about how we can be strategic and targeted on solutions for homelessness, affordable housing, and preventative measures.
Oh my God, I just can't believe how bad the homelessness issue is these days. I mean, like, it's like every time I want to go anywhere, on the bar, to the grocery store, like I have to walk by encampments. I can't believe it. It's so disturbing.
Yeah, things have definitely gotten worse for folks out there. Housing costs have just kept rising for years now. More and more people can't make ends meet on their current wages, and that is the result. That is why you see folks so often.
I mean, I know everywhere's expensive in the Bay Area, but I just feel like we throw so much, like billions and billions of dollars at this issue. And it just seems like it keeps getting worse. I just can't wrap my head around it.
I see. There are definitely solutions making a difference, but the people who get help aren't always on the street. We only see the people who are still outside. The problem is that more people are pushed into homelessness than our systems can help out of it. We really need more homelessness prevention to get a handle on the problem. What do you think it would take to actually see a difference?
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I feel like, we're not really also talking about like the people who don't want help. Like, what about all the people who turn down the resources that we do have to offer because, they're just struggling with their mental health and they don't want to come inside? Like, how do we solve for that?
I hear that too, but I think there's more to it. Virtually everybody wants a real home that they can call their own. So if somebody is saying no to shelter, it's usually because they have to leave all of their stuff behind, or their pet, or be separated from a partner or loved one. And often it's only for a night or a short time. Honestly, if I had to choose between that and a tent with my stuff, my friends, and my family nearby to watch out for me, I'd probably pick the encampment. What would you do?
I guess I never thought of it that way before. I think I would probably stay with my family and loved ones as well. But again, the thing that I always come back to and I struggle with is I just don't see with how severe the mental health and addiction and substance use problems are, like how we're ever gonna house our way out of these issues. I mean, some of the way that you see people behaving, it's crazy. So I don't how do we fix that?
Mm-hmm. So put yourself in the situation, right? If you were never safe, couldn't bathe, never knew where your next meal would come from, you would probably feel crazy too, right? But that's actually a minority of people experiencing homelessness who have serious mental health issues. A lot of people are actually working, in school, sometimes living in their cars or couch surfing. It blows my mind how hard that would be. I think that folks with the most serious issues are often the most noticeable, but there are a lot of children who are also homeless and going to our schools. So we can't always focus on the vocal minority. We've all heard people yelling on the street. I just wish our system had better ways to help them.
Yeah, I guess when you put it like that, our system is pretty broken, and I didn't even realize there were homeless kids in our schools. So I think that's a huge problem. And so again, thank you for sharing that with me. I really had never heard that perspective or information before. I mean, I'm still a little, skeptical and frustrated, but I do think that I really appreciated the way that you're able to reframe some of the way that I'm thinking about this.
Of course. it's awesome in my work and in my job where I can see the ways that this work is transforming. We have to look for ways we can find more affordable housing, safe interim housing for families, and target strategies for people of color who are on the street. And I'm always open to talk more.
No, I really appreciate it. I feel like I don't really have anyone to talk to about this, and it just vents and I boils up and I get frustrated. So thank you for listening to me. And again, welcome to our neighborhood.
Thank you. And sing.
Bravo. That was awesome. Let's hear some reflections in the chat real quick before we dive in to the rest of our presentation. What did you hear that was maybe new or that you really liked? And what did you hear that was aligned with the principles in the guide? Any other reflections or reactions? You can just throw them in the chat and we'll keep going. Could lift up a voice or two if anybody wants to share, and I'll just get the screen share back on. And I'll bring up some of those principles from the guide right here. Let's see, I see Michael says shifted the spotlight to systemic problems as opposed to targeting victims. Love the invitation to emphasize the hard choices that people have to make. Yeah, I think kind of asking folks to just think about what you might do in that situation can be powerful. Great. So keep the reflections coming in the chat. I won't be looking at them, but the rest of you can. We're not going to spend a lot of time here reiterating or reading the messaging guide to you, but I did just want to call out the principles that we put there. You know, really lead with values, lead with vision, lead by making the case for how things should be and how that will benefit everyone, and explained the structural forces that are behind, that push people into homelessness and perpetuate the problem. That includes structural racism and the generations of discrimination and inequities that we face, including like structural and policy issues in housing and our economic system. Center homelessness as an experience, not an identity, and really try to lift up voices of folks who have experienced homelessness or who work with those folks directly. We're about to do that next and try to model that for you and focus on solutions. Everyone is familiar with the problem. Everyone can see it. Not many people need a explainer about that in the Bay Area. People are really thirsty to learn about solutions and hear what works. So focus there. And similarly, include a call to action, give folks something to do, make it clear each of us has a responsibility to help solve this problem. Each of us have a role to play. So help spell that out for the folks that you're talking to. And just gonna roll right along and hear a little bit more from Zach about the power of centering lived experience, the power of sharing stories from folks who have experienced homelessness and also from frontline staff who provide direct service. I think it's important for us to remember that those folks also have powerful stories to share. So take it away, Zach. You've got a few minutes.
Thank you, Edie. I appreciate it. My name is Zach Frenette. I'm a director at Ground Floor Public Affairs, and I'm also a member of All Homes Community Advisory Council. Also, you know, someone who has personal lived experience with homelessness. I spent about 3 years kind of on and off the streets, in and out of my car, primarily in Oakland, but other parts of the greater East Bay, and have personally been in recovery for 7+ years from addiction, from drugs and other substances. And so I think I have a personal perspective and passion for this work, but then I also have a layer of professional experience through my day job where I help support some of the community engagement, government relations, and media work for a number of leading homelessness service providers in the Bay Area, including Larkin Street. I see some folks in the chat from Larkin Street. I'm also a Larkin Street alumni, so it's really fun having that aspect of my life come full circle. So I think what I would like to spend some time talking about, and I also want to start just by calling out that I'm sure a lot of the organizations here today are already doing some of this, or would like to be doing more. I do know that a lot of this all ties back into resources and capacity, and that is a challenge pretty much throughout the nonprofit sector, but particularly in the homelessness space. So I just wanted to kind of call that out from the onset. But I can say, both as someone who has been personally involved in this work for over half a decade, and then again, almost 5 years in my current position, I think that the perspective of people who have lived experiences is not only like the something that we should work on as a system doing because it's the right thing to do. I also think it's the most effective messaging strategy we can use with members of the public, particularly those who are skeptical, angry, or really frustrated about the issue. I think that government and the nonprofit community can be viewed as incredible, is not as credible, not incredible, as uncredible sources, or that our messaging points are self-serving, and that it really is the person who is going to be served by the work that we're all hoping to accomplish that is the most compelling. And I think that is true with government leaders who you might be meeting with. I think that's certainly true with the press, who are almost always more willing to entertain positive stories when they include a focus on the human perspective and who is being served. And I also feel like that's the case when it comes to community engagement, because I think anyone here who's been involved in standing up a new physical program pretty much anywhere in the Bay Area, my guess is this is largely true in other parts of the state, knows that it's really, the folks who are going to be most directly incentivized to come out and force on any given project are going to be those who are unhappy about it, right? And so from my perspective, I think the first key step is really about building the bench. And so I think having a core group, and there's a couple of strategies that you could use to get at this, and I'm going to fly through this briefly because I only have a couple of minutes. But I think pulling together a leadership council or an advisory board, and it's always a best practice to compensate folks for their time when you're able to, but it's kind of a turnkey mechanism, similar to how I'm here in my capacity as All Homes Community Advisory Council, which is something that Tamika prioritized from day one. You already have a group of people who are familiar with the organization. It's really easy to integrate public speaking trainings, media workshops, et cetera, et cetera. If you have an existing forum and already have a group of people who are not only willing to share those stories, but also have the institutional support from whatever organization you work with, to feel comfortable and safe and empowered to share those stories. So I think that's a great starting point if your organization or your housing program doesn't have one already. I think it's also worth considering an actual board position for people with lived experience and prioritizing them for leadership roles. As Easy mentioned, the other side of the coin is frontline staff perspectives. I know that a lot of us who go through homelessness or addiction and into recovery and housing, we kind of gravitate towards service already. So my guess is you've probably got quite a few people in your organization who probably can speak from both perspectives. And I always put a plug in. I've been putting a plug in since I started this work for, I think, the enormous challenges, not just emotionally, but also just the realities of frontline staff trying to make it in the Bay Area and kind of being one step ahead of homelessness themselves in many cases. I think that is a really untold story that most of the public is probably unaware of, and also counters, I think, some of the negative tropes around the nonprofit industrial complex, right? And just greedy orgs kind of just growing for the sake of growth. I think that's a really kind of humbling narrative, particularly when driven by someone who also has lived experience with homelessness. And so again, I think it comes out to building the bench, and then I think it comes down to finding opportunities to plug your bench into, right? And I think some of the ways that you can do that is more internally facing, but I always put a plug in for CQI initiatives for service providers. I think that's a great space to get your leadership boards into. Civic positions. So I know that staff at Larkin Street was really supportive for me joining city commissions in the city and county of San Francisco. I served as commissioner for a year for the city and county. I think that's huge. Your board, which I've already mentioned, community advisory groups. If you're standing up a community advisory group for a project and you have people who live in supportive housing and other programs who would be willing to join that community advisory group, I think it helps take a little bit of the tenor that some of these, the sharpness that some of these conversations can delve into, and you have someone who's actually able to represent that lived experience firsthand. Versus if we're talking about homelessness in a vacuum where there aren't actual people involved in the conversation, I think that the people who are skeptics or nasty or unpleasant, to put it mildly, are less likely to be that in the presence of someone who, again, can have that kind of firsthand experience and bring the tone of the conversation down a bit. Media, I think, both in terms of telling stories and opinion pieces, and then bring folks to your advocacy meetings. If you got a meeting with the mayor of your town, or you got a meeting with a state legislator, or whomever you're meeting with in government, bring people along. Again, that's who politicians and decision makers want to hear from the most. I think Edie is staring at me through the Zoom screen, telling me I ran out of time, but I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that this was helpful.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Zach. Perfect. So I'm just going to quickly breeze through a handful of slides with some sample messaging on kind of three main topics that we wanted to go beyond what's in the messaging guide and dig into a little more. Feel free to put your questions or comments in the chat. We'll have a few minutes for some discussion after this before we go into breakout groups. And apologies, and I'm going to go quickly, but we will share these slides and we're recording the session, so never fear. So the first topic is about some of the issues we've already been talking about, particularly chronic homelessness, which is technically, folks who've been living unsheltered for more than a year. And again, we really want to start with vision and shared values that when we meet people in distress with homes, care, dignity, and respect, everyone is safer and better off. We all need safe, dignified places to call home, and really connect to the universality of our need for care. We all have a time in our lives when we need care to get by, even that's when we're a child or as an elder. And when we care for the people in our community who need it, our whole community is stronger for it. So do try to kind of start there. And then similar to what you heard in the role play, well, first let's explain root causes. Let's remind folks about the real root cause, that the biggest drivers of homelessness are housing and economic forces. But obviously there's this very visible minority who are struggling with complex health issues, and remind folks that we might not recognize the less visible majority of people experiencing homelessness who are holding down a job, couch surfing, staying doubled up with friends and family, et cetera. So do remind folks that the visible experience is not the only experience, and that these are our neighbors. These are fellow human beings who are clearly in need of care. Connect with humanity and compassion, and remind folks that also folks experiencing homelessness, especially unsheltered and sheltered, they're highly likely to be victims of violent crimes, and put the public safety focus where it belongs. These folks are struggling to simply survive, and their lives are in real danger, much more so than say our lives by witnessing the distress that they're going through. And then again, that our healthcare and legal systems are just not designed to provide the care that these folks actually need. They're designed to put people in jail or in the emergency room, and there's not a lot of other options that are well developed in our system. So another thing to point out that I find persuasive is that mental illness and drug use are even more common in other places in the country that don't have a major homelessness crisis like we do here. So, you know, whether you don't have to name, you know, is Appalachia or the Rust Belt or other places in other states where housing is plentiful and affordable, you know, having these kinds of complex problems doesn't mean you can't be housed. The real problem here is affordability and scarcity of housing. And then move to solutions. There is a solution that works to stabilize people with complex needs or whose health has deteriorated from being unsheltered for years. That's another helpful way to remind folks that people's condition may be a result of their situation, not necessarily the other way around. And that's permanent supportive housing. That's permanently, deeply affordable, deeply subsidized housing with wraparound supportive services right there on site that allows folks to stabilize and be well and stay housed. But we don't have enough of those units. We don't have enough money to operate them. We don't even have enough expert staff to meet the need if we had that money. But those are problems we can fix. And again, when we do meet people in distress with homes, care, dignity, and respect, everyone will be safer and better off. So hopefully those are some helpful frames. Let's talk about money. Let's lean into an abundance mindset and reject the scarcity mindset that we so easily can fall into. Our government has resources. There are billions of taxpayer dollars sloshing around this state, this country, and we are choosing to spend them on other things besides saving the lives of the most vulnerable members of our community. Things like Prop 13 or the mortgage tax deduction or corporate subsidies. Like, don't let yourselves be drawn into the, you know, fiction that we don't have money in our system. We're just these are choices. They're choices that our elected leaders make, and ultimately choices that we make as voters when we do or don't hold people accountable. That scarcity mindset can lead to pitting solutions against each other, which we also should not do. You know, I'm going to talk in a minute about our framework for homelessness solutions, but we've seen examples lately of local leaders, you know, saying, yes, we need interim housing. Why don't we use this permanent housing money to do that? And the answer is, you know, no, we should not be robbing Peter to pay Paul. We should be finding other sources for that important intervention, which is underfunded and underdeveloped because we live in a place where permanent housing takes forever and costs a fortune to create. And we should not have sidewalks be the waiting room for a permanent home. So folks, you know, deserve a little dignity, a little decency while we try to solve the permanent housing challenges that we have. But let's find other money for those interim solutions because they're not real housing. It's just a temporary place, and we need to move people into permanent supportive permanent housing as quickly as possible, and we can't be shortchanging one solution to pay for another. And real solutions are worth the cost. We are facing the result of decades of bad policy, decades of inaction and discriminatory policies that have created this deep racial wealth gap and inequities and, you know, our housing system and segregation, frankly, in our housing system that is still with us. And we shouldn't expect, you know, $1 billion or one program to solve those deep deep decades old problems. Too often when folks are demanding solutions, they're frustrated that the solutions we're spending $1 billion on this program. Why isn't it working? I still see homeless people outside, when I go out. And, let's not blame the solutions. Let's remind people about the depth of the problems. That solutions blaming mindset, you might hear it when folks want to see an audit of a homelessness program, or cuts because they're not seeing results, or a total change in strategy. Let's try something else. This doesn't seem to be working. Again, our problems are visible, but our solutions to homelessness tend to be invisible. So we have to make the solutions visible, and expecting, one program or 5 years to solve a problem is like taking an aspirin to cure a broken leg and then demanding to know why our leg still hurts. Like, let's be realistic about the depth of the problem that we're trying to solve. And importantly, remind people that we can do this, we can solve these problems, we have the solutions, we know what to do. We need permanent ongoing funding for operations and services at permanent supportive housing and, other service providers. We need to ensure that those solutions reach the BIPOC communities who have been disproportionately impacted, not because of any fault of their own, but because of those decades of discriminatory policies and our unjust systems. And then let's also remember that we just did this. Pandemic relief programs prove that we can do big things with urgency. We can spend money and make people's lives better. We stood up Home Key in a matter of moments. We had a federal rental assistance program that distributed billions of dollars to people in need and kept them in their homes. We stopped evicting people for over a year in this country, and the expanded child tax credit lifted 3.7 million children out of poverty in a matter of months. That all was amazing. Let's not go back to the way things were, but let's double down on those investments and improve them, and remind folks that big things are possible. Let's not forget. And I think, yes, Corey just shared in the chat, there's a great messaging toolkit that Change Consulting and the San Francisco Foundation put together around equitable recovery that I commend to you all. And that is the end of my presentation. We have 5 minutes or so for some Q&A. I'm not watching the chat, so Kate from M&R, if you want to jump in and call on anybody or lift up any good comments or questions from the chat, happy to engage for a little bit before we go into breakouts.
Yeah, for sure. So we haven't seen a ton of specific questions in the chat yet, but I was looking back over, how people introduced themselves and what they were interested in hearing more about, and some of this ED is stuff that you already touched on, but I wondered if you could expand a little more specifically on sort of more positive ways to talk about, neighbors who are experiencing homeless, and how to talk to NIMBYs.
Sure. I mean, we all go through a tough time in our lives. Nobody has a great day every day. We've all been through, most of us have been through some kind of trauma. And the fact is that not everybody has a safety net, a network of friends and family to bail us out when times are tough. So I think that's another way to kind of tap into people's own experience. Like, were you ever in a position where you had to stay with somebody or, kind of be in an in-between place while you were figuring something out? Well, lucky you that you had that place to be while you figured out your next step. Not everybody does. That's one thing that comes to mind. Love to hear other suggestions that folks have if you want to add them in the chat. What was the other question about?
Talking to NIMBYs.
NIMBYs. It's a tough one. The first thing I want to say is that, kind of like how Zach was saying, like the folks who show up at a meeting to oppose a project, you're unlikely to bring them around to your point of view. So first and foremost, you don't necessarily need to change those most vocal opponents' minds. We need to drown them out and bring our own people to the table who too often are too busy or doing other things to show up. So I think first and foremost is organize and, but when you're, you often hear NIMBYs say in opposing one project that they of course they support affordable housing, and of course they support this, and of course they're worried about homelessness, but just something about this location or this site just isn't quite right, doesn't quite work. So I think we have to call people out on that. What's the word? It's impossible to be for that and against it at the same time. And these are regional problems. And if everybody's passing the buck to somewhere else, that's what got us into this mess in the first place. And you can't be for those things and speaking against them at a public meeting, like just no. So that's not a very compassionate or that's kind of an antagonistic way to approach it, but curious to hear, how do we talk to NIMBYs who live in affordable housing? I mean, great point. Maybe ask folks to remember how it was before you got that spot. Love to hear what works, or any more from Noelle if you want to jump off mute.
I work for an affordable housing group, and it just fascinates me how vocal some of our residents are against the housing element and against any more housing in the community when it has made life viable for them. And I just don't get it. I mean, such vitriol against the people who would be their medical providers, their grandkids, teachers, like all of that. And I'm just floored.
Well, there's a clue right there, right? Remind folks that, these are valuable members of our community, just like them. And, a lot of folks have something to contribute, although you don't have to hold down a job to contribute to your community. I forgot the other thought that I just had. Oh, just that there's a long tradition in this country of people pulling up the ladder behind them. That is, it's tough to see.
Unfortunately so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe one or two more comments before we jump into breakout rooms, and then you'll have a chance. We're going to put you in groups of 4 to talk over a couple prompts with each other. Anything else coming up in the chat? How did I do? Give me an emoji if you liked it.
I like this comment from Barbara too, that we don't need to convince every single person.
Exactly. Focus on your friends. Give them the tools and resources they need to show up and speak out and be effective. And changing minds is tough. Political campaigns don't spend much time on it for a reason. It's just finding your friends. All right. So Madison is going to help us break you into groups of 4. Please stick around. Again, there is the toolkit coming after the breakout rooms. And Madison, we didn't say, but I think if we do 8 minutes or 7, let's do 8 minutes. And technically that's like 2 minutes each for each person. Try to give everybody a chance to speak in your room. And be on the lookout for, actually, let's put we could put the Jamboard up afterwards, but we're going to have a Jamboard with some of your favorite ideas along these same lines for the prompts. So afterwards, we want to capture some of your good ideas or your questions or further needs for messaging. So we'll take a couple of minutes after the breakouts to put stuff in the Jamboard. And thanks, Veronica, for sharing the Jamboard link. Right now, feel free to go in there at any time, but really the breakouts are just to focus on conversations. Don't spend too long introducing yourselves, just dive right in and discuss what we've been talking about with each other. Okay, we'll see you all back soon. Okay, great. Well, please continue to fill out the Jamboard. You can also do so after the workshop is done, and you can refer back to it. Keep the link, it's here for you so that you can refer back to the ideas that came up or questions or anything that's useful there. And Veronica, why don't you take it away? I think we can unpin me and show us the toolkit, and I'll share the link to it in the chat.
Awesome. Yeah, let me just share my screen. One second. I might actually need you to screen share, Edie.
No problem.
Little tech difficulty here.
No problem. We're just
My
giving
side.
people extra time to fill out that Jamboard. I got you. I'm going to share the toolkit first, and then you might just want to tell me how you want me to share the images, but here we go.
Yeah, so as Edie mentioned, this is the toolkit that we put together. I know sometimes we're all busy folks. It can be hard to actually know how to adopt the messaging guide and use it on something like social media. So our idea was to create some sample content that you can either just post as is, or you can take it and adapt it to any work that you're currently doing at any specific calls to action. So if you want to click the bookmarks on the left, Edie.
Yeah.
You can see that we have content for Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram as well. So you can click to the platform you want, and on the left, you'll see the sample post. On the right, you'll see the visual, but at the top of each of the little tables, so like if you went to the top of where the Twitter posts are, you'll see that there's a link to a folder that if you want to click through to that, that'd be good. Where all the visuals live. And I think there's a note on the toolkit as well, but there's different dimensions. So if you want to see, if you want to use the square version or the portrait version or landscape, there's a few different ones. And then hopefully if you click, yeah, you can see that we try to provide some different examples, again, pulling from the messaging guide. Let's see.
It's slowly moving to on view. Sorry.
There you go. So most of them are just in the main folder. You'll see some subfolders for the kind of swipe through explainers that you could use for Instagram or other platform of your choice. And yeah, so please use this if helpful. If you have any feedback, let us know as you're using it. And I believe someone put the link in the chat. We'll also make sure to follow up in the follow-up to include a link.
Ooh, Irene is asking for videos and memes. Stay tuned.
Yes, well, hopefully, this is just the start. So hopefully we'll be able to add more to it.
My
I'm
computer
not the best. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just
here.
My computer is slow. Okay, here we go. Now I can scroll through some close-ups of some of the images we've got. We had some. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say in response to Irene, if anyone wants to create any awesome memes and share them with us, we can always add it as well. I'm not the best at memes specifically.
I was just gonna say we got connected to some of these models in the photos from Hamilton Families, Sacred Heart down in San Jose, and Bay Area Community Services. I think they were the ones who connected us to these folks. Slowly scrolling through. So some of the messages will be familiar to you from the guide. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out to Veronica or myself if you've got feedback or questions about these. And you have the link. Go forth and share freely.
Speaking of feedback, is this a
Okay.
good time for me to pop back in?
I think it is. We're about done. Take it away, Elena.
Not quite done. Hi, everybody. It's me again, Alina from NPH. Thanks for being here today. I am dropping one more link for you in the chat box, which I hope you will open up and take just a few moments to share with us your reflections on this workshop. This helps us really be thoughtful about how we're partnering with you to deliver additional trainings workshops down the road, but also like what next can come out of this. Thank you, Irene, for already throwing some ideas in the chat box. We know lots of you have thoughts about how to make this guide, this research, these message recs more useful in your work, and we'd love to hear from you. So please grab that link, pop it open, share your thoughts with us. Thank you for being here today. Thank you to all of our presenters and all of the tech support on the back end. And check us out at shiftthebay.org. Check out all Homes resources. Let's keep the conversation going. Have a happy Thursday all, and have a wonderful day.